Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 497. My name is Minter Dial and I'm your host for this podcast, a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. For more information or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. So this week's interview is with my old friend Brenda Keesal. Brenda's a writer, filmmaker, and digital storyteller based in Montreal. She's also the founder and creative director of The Village, a human and media platform and an innovative model for interactive storytelling, transformative entertainment, and social impact. Both online and in person, The Village offers deep experiences and profound connection through a live stream and curated network of human stories. In this conversation with Brenda, we discuss her career, including the award-winning film Wanker. Her blogging burns the fire. We explore her new project, The Village, of course, how it came about, what it entails, and how she shepherds the conversations and personal storytelling from people around the world. We also discuss the work that she's been doing for UkraineNow, the decentralised organisation launched by Artur Kiulian. Plenty of inspiring stories and learnings. You'll find all the show notes on minterdial.com as usual, and please do go and drop in your rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe to catch all the future episodes. Hey, now for the show. Who'd have thought? Brenda Keesal. Oh my gosh. That's got to be the shortest introduction I have ever done. Brenda, you and I have known each other for nearly 2 decades, I'd say, probably 2 decades, actually. We met in sunny, cold, wonderful Montreal, and you are a kindred storyteller, writer, filmmaker. We have so many little things in common. And in your own words, who's Brenda?
Well, on the best days, I am my middle name, which is Joy. And the older I get, the easier it is to let it flow, the easier it is for me to access it. The more I explore my freedom through joy.
How does one shortcut the getting old piece? Because if someone's listening and they're young, what is it that allows us to lean into that joy, do you think, Brenda?
And it's funny that I said joy, by the way, because normally I would say love. That's a great question. What allows us to lean into the joy? I'd say working through our baggage and surrendering to life, which doesn't mean being passive. It means more allowing the things that you can't control and dancing as much as possible. And singing. Mm-hmm. And, smoking pot.
A good combo. So I was going to start with your film that made, let's say, a notorious round, famous round, infamous, The Wanker. Wow. How tell us about that film and what it did for you.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit of backstory. First of all, it's called Wanker, which was probably the easiest film to come up with taglines for. The first one was coming soon. Mm-hmm. Then Wanker, his life was in his hands. So Wanker was born inside me when I was probably around 16, 17. And I made friends with someone who was culturally very, very different from me. He came from a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant background and sort of came with what I, grew to learn was some baggage around that or some cultural leanings. And we were both kind of fascinated with each other, me as a kind of, very, very expressive Jew and him as a very sort of buttoned down WASP. And so one night he told me a story about being at his parents' for Thanksgiving. And it was a very buttoned down meal. And everybody was quiet. Nobody was really saying anything. And in my mind, I started to hear the clinking of glasses and the clinking of cutlery. And he said that through the meal, he became so upset by what he felt was nothing happening, no one speaking, no one rubbing up against each other, that he finally had to excuse himself and go into a closet upstairs and masturbate. So then he said he was in the closet and he was doing his thing and relieving the pressure that he felt inside. And then all of a sudden he heard the sound of footsteps, but he didn't pay any attention because he was in the closet and nobody was going to find him there. And then all of a sudden, just as he was reaching peak masturbation, he hears a squeak and the door of the closet opens, the light switch flicks on, and his mother is standing there and looks at him. He's holding his dick in his hands, and they just stare at each other. And then, probably like a second, but it felt like a year. And then she smashed the door closed. And I don't remember actually if I wrote this part of the story or not. I probably did. But what happens next is that he's still standing inside the closet with his hand gripped onto his dick and just in pure shock. When another squeak, the door reopens and he doesn't see his mother. He just sees her hand as she reaches out with a piece of pie on a plate and says, I just thought you might like some dessert. It's your favorite. And that was the beginning of Wanker. That story lived and breathed inside of me. And I eventually wrote it into a film, a sort of medium length film, and we made it for zero money. Just, we had our microphone was attached to, people in the film biz will know, a boom pole. It's a pole that holds the microphone and helps to keep it steady. We used like a mop, just to give you.
So it wasn't a boom, it was a broom pole.
It was a broom pole, exactly. And so that was the type of super indie production it was, and somehow by the grace of human beings, we got what we needed. I was able to finish the film, edit it. We got everything done. A huge collective of people doing things here and there, and we premiered the film at the New Orleans Film and Video Festival. And then we won an award at the Chicago Film Festival, and the main English language film critic in Montreal saw the film, loved it, and really called it one of the 10 best films of the year, and really started to herald it. And so it became a kind of small sleeper hit in the independent world at a time when masturbation was really not talked about a lot. So it was a bit of a thing.
And remind me when it came out?
I don't remember. In the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm terrible with dates.
Yeah. Well, it situates the period,
yes.
if you will.
Yes. But I remember that, I don't know if you ever watched the comedy Seinfeld, but it was a huge hit, for many years. And they had done a sort of notorious episode where they talked about masturbation but never used the word.
Yeah.
So it became really kind of famous, and that was probably within the same year.
Well, it or something like that. That was how it was referred to, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing it.
You're doing what everybody does, or really most people do. And in fact, one of the things that was so amazing about Wanker is how so many men would come up to me after screening, young guys, and say, "Oh my God, that's me."
Well, it does speak to obviously the cultural elements. On the one hand, the sort of buttoned up, don't express yourself kind of generation as well. And on the other side, the more expressive, because those are two types, if you will, not necessarily Jew and Protestant, but that that one is about the burning, the fire, the way you have always been, and the other is the idea of buttoned down and not expressive, and the angst that that causes. But I mean, there's no perfect recipe, but it does seem to be a lingering feeling for me today, where there's so many things we shouldn't say or can't say. And
Mm,
so where it used to be self-imposed is now societally imposed in terms of the vocabulary and the freedoms of expression.
mm.
And there's good things in that, but there are countervailing elements to it where people don't feel the right or the liberty to think things. You can sort of, well, you can think it in your space, in your private side, but not out loud. And I think it's created another type of vacuum in our society.
Yeah, I mean those are great points, and I would agree with you on that. Personally, I'm a believer in freedom of speech, obviously, but um, I need to think about it a little more before making like a super heavy public statement. But I would say, off the top of my head, that I believe in respect and kindness even more. So free to say what you think and what you feel, but under the umbrella of respect. Because when we are disrespectful, we kind of court disrespect. So
There's a gray zone in there,
there's a
and
great, and
obviously
yes, of course, there always is. Yeah, yeah,
context counts.
yes.
So, one of the things that know about you is your writing, and you had this wonderful blog that was very much an expression of you, your Jewish heritage, things that make you um, get all riled up. It was called Burns the Fire. So tell us about that journey and what it was like to blog so in such a raw fashion.
Ha. Well, at that point, I was moving away from the film business because the frustration of how much time and how many people and how much money, it was just driving me crazy, and I needed something more direct. Um, and Burns the Fire was born out of that frustration and that need to communicate, and not just communicate, from that I've always had a need to express, but a need also to exchange, and a need to feel, to go outside my bubble and feel part of the greater whole. And the blog afforded me that. It was tremendously fun, and even though I haven't blogged in a couple of years, I plan on bringing it back very soon, actually. It was great fun, and it was also deeply painful because I, up until then, had only written fiction. I made things up, and it was, I found, very painful to write in my own voice like that, from my own heart. So that's, so it was hard, and I labored over it. But at the same time, it was enormously exciting, and I learned so much. First of all, about the blogosphere and about sort of living online, and more deep to me was different ways of communicating and telling stories. So really, through blogging, I learned how to tell stories in the 21st century.
Hmm. There's an interesting element of the arm's length of fiction, isn't there?
Yes. Very much so. Yes. And I never, I was pretty naive in those days, I think, in the sense of not really understanding how much of me went into my fiction,
Hmm.
how much of me, my life, my observations, everything. But, I just, people often call me a visionary, and I have had tremendous difficulty with it up until now. Because last week I had a little bit of a revelation, and I realized indeed I am a visionary. And the reason why I'm a visionary is because I have a vision of a better world where people can be happier, healthier, more loving, more interconnected. And so that is really the drive beneath everything that I do, is somehow, for some reason, and sometimes it's a burden, but lots of times it keeps me going. It keeps my fire burning, that somehow I believe in us. I believe in the power of our hearts, our souls, our minds, our abilities. I believe in, in the outrageous beauty of the world.
Would you call that oneness?
Yes. Yeah, I would. I don't go around calling it oneness, but I would. It's that interconnection. It's that interconnection. And I find that when I was very young, I didn't feel it. And the older I get, the more I feel it.
So let's move on to you and I reconnected in this particular initiative. So you're the founder and creative director of The Village. The Village. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Well, the latest, simplest way of expressing it is that at the Village, so what happens there is we gather all over the world to share our stories and grow closer together. The Village is what I call a human and a media platform. And the two main pillars of it are live and virtual, but right now we're focused on the virtual and building the virtual village. Gatherings where people share their stories with the help and inspiration of a talented, trained host. These are kind of what I call transformative experiences, something very, very deep and touching and powerful happens when people come together and share the stories of their lives. And I grew to realize through doing this live in a cafe where the whole thing was born, where I started a group, because I had met so many interesting people when I spent time blogging in this cafe, that I realized, my God, I want more. I want more people sharing stories. And I think other people need to hear this as well. And what I didn't put together at the time, that it wasn't just that other people needed to hear each other's stories, but that other people needed to tell stories as well. And that's sort of what makes it a little bit different from a lot of the storytelling platforms that are out there, is that everybody there is taking a risk. We're all sharing stories. We're all listening. We are interconnecting. And as we listen and as we share, something kind of magical happens. And we go from being alone to being part of the greater whole, to being part of the collective. You can walk into one of these experiences a stranger to everyone. Everybody there is a stranger to you. And an hour or two later, you can walk out and feel connected to each other. As well, I consider it to be something I call transformative transformative entertainment. Because as a filmmaker and as a writer, I realized this is next level what we're doing here, because we're, yes, we're creative and we're sharing, but we're actually making a movie together, and it's happening live. I'm no longer the filmmaker separate from the experience, recording the experience. I'm actually part of the experience. I'm in it, and we are weaving something together live. And what we are really weaving together is the story of humanity, and what I call a celebration of humanity. So that's one pillar of the village. And then the other pillar is the media platform, where we take the vast majority of the groups that we will be creating under the banner of the village will not be recorded. But for those who are interested in not only having the experience, but helping to create this transformative entertainment for others, these people will join these groups that will be recorded and then turned into podcasts, web series, and the latest vision of this media platform, and that is what I'm calling a call to care or a social impact campaign, because I ended up hosting storytime gatherings for an amazing decentralized global organization called UkraineNow, a little bit into the invasion of Ukraine. And I hosted 18 gatherings with people of all walks of life from all over the world who came together under the banner of UkraineNow to help the Ukrainian people in any way they could. So they took me on to host these gatherings. And these gatherings were recorded. And these gatherings, while everybody was there for something unbelievably devastating, like an invasion, the gatherings were incredibly uplifting, because suddenly we were all together sharing this desire to be in service to each other. And it was really, really powerful. So I realized, oh my God, there's something here. And I partnered up with UkraineNow. We at the village partnered up with UkraineNow and decided to create what we call Hearts of Ukraine, this call to care. So we just started a very sort of soft launch, releasing with a very lean team at the village, because we're just starting and haven't even started fundraising yet. But the imperative of what's going on in Ukraine made us want to release these videos. And they're 25 to 80 seconds long, bite-sized, and focused on the heart, focused on sharing with people the power of people helping people, and then the immense gratitude of the Ukrainian people who are feeling this outpouring of global support.
You've heard of Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. Of course, they're the biggest money managers in the world, and they don't manage a combined $13 trillion by accident. So when they're all talking about moving money into tangible assets, it's hard not to take notice. After all, the 60-40 stock bond portfolio is down an average of 34% this year, its worst performance in a century. But what tangible assets are we talking about? They named one that's guaranteed to surprise you: fine art. According to Goldman Sachs, fine art can help protect your purchasing power even as inflation spikes. It's also appreciated an average of 13.8% annually for the last 26 years. So it's easy to see why many investors are trying to protect their portfolios from inflation by investing in art through Masterworks. Masterworks qualifies each of their paintings with the SEC, so they can split them into shares for you to invest in. They've sold 5 paintings this year alone, with the last 3 delivering 17, 21, and 33% net returns. Masterworks returns speak for themselves, enough that there's even a waitlist right now. But good news is you can skip the waitlist by signing up at masterworks.com and using code MINTER, M-I-N-T-E-R. That's masterworks.com, promo code MINTER. See important Regulations A disclosures at masterworks.com/CD.
A lot in there, dear
I
friend.
know, I'm sorry, Mitcher. I'm supposed to talk in shorter sentences, but
No, you're not supposed to do
my
anything.
cup runneth over.
Indeed. So I wanted to go back to something I feel is important. You write that you enjoy digital storytelling, and I was just wondering, what is the particularity of digital in storytelling as opposed to, I don't know, traditional storytelling? How does we're going to get into the rest in a moment, but how does digital make storytelling different, or what is the particularity of it?
Oh God, I mean, it's a great question, and I would say nobody's ever asked me. And I would say it's everything for someone like me, because you have words and you have images created, and you have photography, and you have live action video, and you have animation, and you have CGI, computer generated images, you have music, you have sound, you have every tool except the tactile at your disposal. And I
Mm.
find that enormously exciting. I have yet, following the New York Times, for example, I've seen them do some interesting things in terms of digital storytelling, but I haven't seen enough to say that it's really, and it's interactive. Oh, let's not forget interactive. Um, I haven't seen a lot of stuff that I think really uses what it will be able to do. It's getting there. It's getting there, but it's unlimited. You know.
Well, indeed. And the reason why I wanted to start with that is that the way you recounted the way you're creating the village, it does lead me to think it's sort of some kind of initial metaversian idea, metaverse, which is sort of a hot topic, but nobody really knows what the hell it is and when it's going to start. But this idea of being filmmaker and filmed at the same time kind of feels like a description of the metaverse where you are both observer and participant through digital lenses.
Right, right. That's a great point. I don't know a whole lot, like most of us, about the metaverse, but there's some things about it that really excite me as an artist, but there's also some things about it that scare me, just like the internet. My deepest concerns these days are very much the heart, soul, and psyche of we humans, and I think we are. There's a lot of amazing things going on in this world, and oh boy, do I hope that we're experiencing what some call the great transition or the great transformation. But in the meantime, I'm seriously concerned about our mental and emotional health and spiritual, psychic health. And I feel like some aspects of the metaverse, and the characters that we can create, even the use of avatars for me is worrisome, because it sort of detaches us more and more from our tactile humanity. I'm worried about that. And here I am, an artist on the internet. I mean, I love it. I love the internet, and I love video conferencing, and I'm interested in VR and AR and all of what it holds in store. But I haven't yet been, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid yet. And I
Mm.
might, but I might not. I just worry about our hearts, and I worry about our disconnection from each other. And that's
Well,
part of what drives me at the village, is to
yeah.
connect us together.
I mean, certainly the digital tools allow for some exceptionally different angles, connection around the world. And yet, to put maybe allay some of the fears at some level, these types of expressions of I'm worried about our humanity have been going on for quite a long time. I mean, every generation basically has the same idea, looking at technology from a distance, whether it was the telegram that's going to put the horse out of business, the telephone, the television, and so on and so forth. And every time the generation sort of, let's say, welcoming it in as the older version and looks at it as, oh, it's going to be bad for humanity. And yet we've always had masks, whether you're in Venice, or wearing an avatar today. I think that the mask is a reality of our human condition in a social environment. And the one who is 100% authentic and naked doesn't really survive well in our society. And I don't blame society for that, but I think that's just the way we are.
Yeah, I mean, all the world's a stage, right? I'm sure that's part of what you're saying. And I agree with you, except for one major caveat, and that is the climate emergency, which is a huge driving force for me behind the village. We have not dealt with, yes, we've been dealing with climate for, many, many decades. We've been aware of it, but not like today. Not like today. I really feel that it's an existential threat that we have never experienced. You can say, well, nuclear, so maybe, but this is just like everywhere. And I just think that it's a game changer. And I also think, and I don't, I haven't given it enough thought here. The point I'm about to make is that where technology is concerned, it's just like with AI, it's just, what many call progress is exponential. I don't have I'm not brainy enough to talk about like exponential and infinity. Put those two together, it's just like growing. It just keeps topping itself, So things are moving faster and faster and faster. And I'm not saying stop developing the work. I'm just saying stay grounded and aware, and each of us has to find our way to find balance, both individually and societally, let alone globally now, because we are connected in a way that we never have been in history.
I would argue that therein is the rub, because I feel that the global design, globalization, is there's some underpinnings that are being undone. We stray. I wanted to get back to a very important point for me, which is the idea of being a host. So I would love for you to explain to us, I think these are transferable skills, or at least the skills that people need to be thinking about. What does it take to be a host in the type of environment where you're bringing in strangers and having them tell stories? How do you host such a thing?
And it's a great question from a great host, Minter, because I remember your dinner parties, which were massively inspiring to me, and no doubt part of my influence. That you guys influenced, you and Yendi influenced me. So the first thing that pops into my mind is to be a great host requires a willingness to share your heart, to be vulnerable, to make suggestions that might make some people uncomfortable, but will, generally speaking, delight the crowd. You got to be willing to go out on a limb. And you also, to be a great host, I think, is to be a great listener. And that's something at our story time gatherings at the village, that it's a real skill that is developed, is to really listen. And even if you can't, to observe yourself struggling to listen. And I think that listening actually is an incredibly important tool. So we can really hear each other and really feel each other, and then we can connect. So I think those are some of the attributes of great host. And I'll tell you a little story that I've told to so few people, and that is that part of the genesis of the village was way before I was blogging in a cafe and started a storytelling group. And that was, I was living in a tiny apartment, and I was having some friends over, because I always love to have people over. And these were wonderful people, and we were sitting around having a nice dinner party, eating nice food, and I started to feel bored. And I remember I thought, I'm bored. This is like, I felt restless. I was like, I love these people. They're all brilliant, amazing people. Why am I bored? And it struck me that maybe I should ask a question of the same question of everybody there, and see what happens. And maybe that could help us come together as a group. I think we were like 6 or 8 people. So the first question that popped in my mind was, well, how did you lose your virginity? And I suggested it. A couple of people were like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, let's try it. Let's try it.
I'm still a virgin.
You lie so beautifully, Minter. Um, so that actually completely changed the evening. And of course, I had to start, and I told the story. And that, my telling the story, gave permission to the others to tell the story. And, and then once people start telling stories, and there's a sense of kind of a free flow, warm, exciting, crackling environment, people are really listening, and then things are awakened in them. Oh, somebody just said a detail. Oh, well, that makes me realize I could tell this. And so we start to weave together through listening and being affected by what we're saying to each other. And then suddenly this one story coupled with another, becomes a much bigger story than each individual. It becomes, again, the story of humanity.
Well, it ends up being an experience that everybody, all those 8 people, will remember. And just to dissect what you just said for me, you asked a question. Then you, as host, showed the unbounded or let's say breaking down the boundaries with a question that was a little provocative, out of the norm, and exposing then after yourself to allow people to fall in behind. And I do think that the idea of the boring dinner party, my golly gosh, that's part of the kind of problem that I was referring to at the very beginning, where we have a protocol of what we're allowed to say. We have boundaries that are fixed. And when you talk about virginity, of course, let's say we could trigger people who are worried about sex. So there's always a risk when you go outside of the boundaries that are allowed. We're not supposed to talk about sex, religion, and politics at dinner, but there you go into one of the, verboten triad. And it's a wonderful thing. And so I can only applaud that idea of being a host who's has the courage to ask a more thistly question out of the ordinary, because that'll spark. So one of the issues I have in storytelling is that some stories are better than others, and some people are better at telling stories. And I feel like if you come in behind someone who's just had a bomb landed in Kharkiv on their house, and you have to go after them, well, my problem is, look at my pinky, it's a little broken, and no big deal. So the pathos, the weight of stories sometimes can overbear others who aren't quite as comfortable or feel that their stories aren't really quite as worthwhile. How do you manage that as a host?
I am so enjoying your questions. Terrific points. Absolutely. A few things, come up for me. One is, and I think strangely, story time in the virtual setting is a little bit more formal than story time when you're in real life.
Yeah, you had the wine, the drink, the little pause, and the tinkle of the glasses and tableware. And you feel each other, you smell each other.
Oh, it's completely different. But I don't compare them too much. I mean, I love story time online. I love it. I love hosting it, and I loved it in real life too. Now I'm very hooked on the online at the moment. But there's a kind of grace that establishes itself. I always say, and I haven't released this video yet, that of me talking about an open heart. And I always say, an open heart opens hearts. And that helps to create a kind of grace. And what I have experienced often is that if somebody tells a blockbuster, epic story that is impossible to match in the moment, nobody wants to actually try to match that story because it just takes its space and is its own entity. But naturally, what tends to come after that is somebody saying, that was so amazing, I can't match it. Here's a little story.
Hmm.
And actually, the little story, and I tend to, I often say to people when sharing a topic, so there's a topic around story time and stories of whatever the topic is. And I always tell people, like, you can tell, because people tend to think, oh, if I'm going to tell this, a story of family or friendship or love or forgiveness or, ecstasy or whatever, I've got to find something huge and dramatic and colorful. And I will tell you, my personal favorites tend to be what I'll call the smaller, quieter stories, but that reveal us in our deep, tender humanity. I remember an older woman coming to one of the early gatherings of story time, and she started, when I said, who wants to go next? She kind of like stuck up her finger and said, okay. And she was very meek. And she started and she said, I'm really a very ordinary person. And I remember the moment that she said that, and I thought, this woman, I don't know what she's going to tell us, but this woman. When you scratch every human being, you're going to find stories of interest. Whether they may not be that well told, and to address your question about, like, well, what happens when somebody's not a great storyteller? Couple of things. One, we try, it really is, part of the host's job to encourage people to keep their stories down to a certain length. Encourage people to stay on topic. These are not storytelling workshops. These are not how to tell stories, but you learn by listening. You learn by sharing. It's experiential learning. If you're interested in becoming a better storyteller and coming to story time. And I find that given the heart that flows through these experiences, people have more patience for people who aren't as good. And then people who aren't as good, who come back, tend to be better. And we don't always tell great stories. I'll tell the same story and I'll do a shitty job. I have to be fully present. And indeed, one of the things that I learned from a very young trans man who came for years to story time, he was so brilliant, man. He would, before he even started to tell a story, everybody would be, it's his turn. We'd be looking at him, waiting, and he would pause. Instead of jumping like most of us do. So we learn from each other, and, instead of speeding up, stop. If you find yourself going off, stop. All of this stuff, it's a work in progress. We are works in progress. But it is certainly my observation that the more you tell a story, the better you get at telling, and the more you tell stories in general. And there are some people who are natural born storytellers.
So in our world of disconnection, the notion of a story begetting a story is so clear to me, and I love it. And it makes me think about how when someone is telling a story, it pops into your mind, oh, that reminds me of my story, which is the way to connect into the story. But what we tend to do is start now thinking of my story.
Yes.
And rather than pause, like this man you're telling us about, or maybe even asking a question to go further into the other person's story, we sort of jump to our story. And so I feel like this notion of a pause, or at least stay with the other person's story before rabbit hole or monkey brain jump into because it's all about me after all. And that's the funny thing about stories, because they do have that sort of ignition component to ignite other people's imagination and or memories, which is the beautiful thing of storytelling. However, listen in.
Yes. Yeah, I know you're just pointing out, all of our, tenderness and vulnerability, really. Again, it's a practice, it's an experience. Um, yes, me, but that's one of the things that story time at the village naturally addresses. You come in as me, you leave as us.
Mm. So,
And you
Brenda,
may not be listening as brilliantly as you'd like to, but it's something that you can learn, especially. And here's part of the secret sauce. So, one aspect is an open heart opens hearts. And another aspect is when we feel seen and heard, we feel loved. And when we feel loved, we want to share that love. So therefore, we become more generous to others. We listen better and we start to care more, not just about ourselves, but about each other. And that
100%.
is
Yeah.
incredibly powerful and transformative. And to me, inspiring care in people and connection in people and creativity in people through our own stories, what we have the easiest access to, can help change the world, can help teach us to learn to work together and help bridge the divide that is, that is destroying us.
Yeah, and also when you start telling a story of your, like you burn the fire kind of personal story, if you've never said it before, the very act of telling it in public is structuring and helps you to maybe come to grips with it, because you're talking about the baggage that we have at the beginning. Brenda, wonderful, fun chat with you. Let everybody know how they can dig into any of these, the village, participate, UkraineNow. Tell us where the top priorities are. If anyone is listening is inspired by this, how they can help or just attend, participate, whatever.
Thank you, Minter. Okay, here we go.
I'm going to note everything down.
Help. We need help. We definitely need help. We need people to work on the village. We need people to volunteer in the village. We need people who are interested in being hosts. People who are interested in coming and sharing and experiencing the village. Right now, we have our first ideation of the website up. We haven't built the app yet. The website URL is thevillageearth.com. thevillageearth.com. We have opened up social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok, where it seems to be doing the best. We have yet to start promoting or even engaging on social media, so this is very, very, very beginning. We're just babies out there, but please come visit us. It may not be that easy always to find us because of the village is quite a common term, but just look on all of those platforms and please find us, or go to the website, thevillageearth.com, and it will give you a link to our link tree so you can follow us on social media. And please do, if you're interested in donating or investing in the village, please reach out to us through social media or at info@thevillageearth.com. So any queries about any ways in which you can help, you can send to info@thevillageearth.com. We would love to hear from you.
What about UkraineNow? What link would that
UkraineNow. Yes, it's all over our social media. You can get to their, thank you for asking, you can get to their website is ukrainenow.org. So ukrainenow.org, O-R-G. It's very, very simple. When you get on their website, you can see volunteer, donate, click the button. Amazing people, not only Artur Kiulian, who is the Ukrainian-born, he lives in Los Angeles. He is a serial entrepreneur. This is his second amazing decentralized global organization where he brings people all over the world together to help each other. And that's the story. How can we do this? That's the uplift. That's the inspiration. It is really amazing to be a part of it. And I invite you all to join.
Хорошо. That was Russian. I don't know if it's Ukrainian as well, but hey, Brenda.
Hey, Minter.
Merci. So fun to listen to you, your lovely voice, and your great initiatives. So, à bientôt, j'espère.
Moi aussi, j'espère. Thank you so much, Minter, and keep up the amazing work. And you guys could just teach the world how to gather. So keep sharing.
Thanks for having listened to this episode of the Minter Dialogue podcast. If you like the show and would like to support me, please consider a donation on patreon.com/MinterDial. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast service. And as ever, rating and reviews are the real currency for podcasts. You'll find the show notes with over 2,000 and more blog posts on minterdial.com. Check out my documentary film and 4 books, including my last one, You Lead, How Being Yourself Makes You a Better Leader. And to finish, here's a song I wrote with Stephanie Singer, A Convinced Man.
I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger. To feel free, trust is the reason. Still, I won't toe the line. I sit here passively, hope for your respect, anticipating the thrill of your intellect. Maybe I tell myself there's no use in me lying. I'm a convinced man, building an urge. I'm a convinced man, to live and die submerged. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, challenge my fate. I'm a convinced man, competition's innate. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. Despise revenges and struggle with deceit. Live for the challenge so life's not incomplete. What's wrong with challenge? I know soon we all die. I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger. To feel free, trust in my reason, and let me show you why. I'm a convinced man, practicing my lines. I'm a convinced man, here in these confines. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, admit to the test. I'm a convinced man, I'm ready for an arrest. I'm a convinced man, in the arms of a woman.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.